think we always don't consider enough, or don't have as good of a knowledge base. Welcome to another week on the D3 Datacast. I'm Zach Snyder, here with Matt Snyder. Matt, how was your week?
I had a good week besides attending games. The team I follow lost a couple of games this week, but other than that, my week was good. How was your week, Zach?
It was good. Yeah, it was good to make a drive across the state and get to
Yeah.
attend a game with you. Aside from the final score, Matt, our hosts at Hope College were wonderful. Great hospitality there. Thanks to Alan Babbitt for accommodating us. And yeah, it was good. Good to get to a game, have some great seats there at DeVos Fieldhouse. Get to watch it side by side with you, and to the other side of you was Riley Zayas,
Yeah.
who was in town. He's been a man about the D3 hoops world, really, and he made his latest stop in Holland, Michigan, as he's preparing to write a book about Division III basketball. So looking forward to that project as it comes to fruition, and great to just catch up with him. I had a chance to meet him the last couple of years in Fort Wayne, and so fun to see him on the road here during the season, and looking forward to catching up with him again in Fort Wayne. And also in town, Matt, Division III coordinator of officials for men's basketball, Jim Haney.
Jimbo.
Good to Always great to chat with Jim, a great
Yeah.
personality. He was a recent guest on Hoopsville, so you can
Yeah.
check out Dave McHugh's talk with him. Always good information to hear some perspectives from the officiating side. It's a very important side of the
Yeah.
game that I think we always don't consider enough, or don't have as good of a knowledge base as we should. And so it's great just to be able to talk basketball and get a little bit of a different perspective on the game. Certainly, Jim is just a great Division III basketball fan, but
Mhm.
also for him to be in the position he is in, and to have the expertise in officiating, it adds a great element.
Yeah, you mentioned Riley's been traveling a lot. Jim's been traveling a lot on the officiating side of things, checking out crews, and giving them training, giving them feedback. He's been a great resource for Division III. That's something, officiating is something I just kind of take for granted. I show up to games, there's officials there. I don't know who assigns them. I don't know how they get that feedback, how they get that training. So it's interesting to hear from a guy like Jim, who sees so many different officials from around the country, who works on assigning officials for the NCAA tournament, the Final Four, and how we can pick out the best crews out there from around the country and kind of reward them with those big stages and those big events.
And Matt, it's interesting to have that interaction, given what took place here this weekend. A big call, no call, you could say. For those who maybe didn't see on social media, there was a shot Morrisville took in a closing second situation against SUNY Poly. The shot was counted. It was a tie game. It counted as a buzzer beater, but Matt, even before I knew that there was any controversy, I saw this play just on social media,
Mhm.
and I saw it, and I just kind of thought, wait, something didn't look right. And sure enough, it's pretty easy to see that shot should not have counted, right? The game should not have ended. It should have gone to overtime. But the way that things work is that certain conferences allow or have adopted video replay to be used in that situation. In the case of this game between Morrisville and SUNY Poly, that was not available. So there was no opportunity to review the play. And so it stood. And Matt, so that's certainly a terrible result in itself just for SUNY Poly. It's just one of those things you see that you feel like shouldn't be. And there's a simple solution to that, and that's video replay. But that's just not on the table. The conference does not have that as part of their protocol on game day. And the big point that I think we need to make, or that people need to understand, is that this is also the way it is in the NCAA tournament until we get to the Final Four, right? So those first two weekends, just as an NCAA protocol, the rules regulations do not allow for instant replay to take place. So had this game been a first, second, Sweet 16, Elite 8 game, the exact same result would have happened.
Yeah.
There would be no video review. It's not a case by case, site by site basis. In the NCAA tournament for the first 2 weekends, there is no video review. I don't know that people know that or understand that, but that's a big problem. Let's just say that this is you know a first weekend game, Matt. Um, Calvin's playing Illinois Wesleyan in the second round, and someone
Big
is
game.
going on to the second weekend because of an illegitimate buzzer beater, and someone's going home instead of playing what should be an overtime
Yeah.
period, simply because the officials do not have the option to review in the NCAA tournament opening weekend or the second weekend.
Yeah, that could be a potentially huge result, a tournament changing result. We saw last year Farmingdale State almost knock off Christopher Newport. They had a buzzer shot that didn't go in. But like that, what if that did go in, and let's say that was late enough at the buzzer where it's like, did he get it off or not get it off? We can't even get it right. So I think that's huge. I think that's something that could be discussed here. I think we all became aware of this. We both became aware of this play on a Ryan Scott tweet. I think he shared this video out and it kind of went through Division Three, and it is one of those plays. First glance, you think it is late, and there are several frames on the video that you can click through where it's like his hand is still in contact with the ball, and this day and age, whatever it is, like 90% of Division Three games, just in the regular season, are even streamed. I know we don't have multi-camera views. I know we're not going to have the level of replay ability, high definition cameras that the Division One tournament has. I don't think we want to bog down Division Three games with too much review, but getting a big like end of game, end of half, is the shot, did the time expire or not? Getting that type of a play correct, getting the obvious ones correct. I think that's something we could do in the NCAA tournament without too much of a difficulty. I know the technology varies, but you could do something as simple as having a laptop or an iPad available at the scorer's table. And you and I sat at the scorer's table Saturday night at a Calvin Hope game. There are like dozens of devices that people have. Some are media people, so they're not like available for the referees, but there's devices everywhere. It would be easy to have a device that we could click through, rewind a few seconds, check out the play. Is it an obvious change or not? The referees tried to get it right. They got together on the floor on this play, and they didn't have another angle or another opinion that they could change it to. And that's what happened. I think they were doing a good job. I think they missed the call. I think it's true they missed the call. They tried to get it right. They didn't. And Morrisville got the win, and SUNY Poly didn't. Now, this is a regular season game. It could have Pool C implications. Morrisville is maybe in the Pool C mix, and they got the win, maybe a win that they wouldn't otherwise have. So if it comes down to it, like, does even Morrisville get a Pool C win, Pool C bid because they had an additional win that maybe they might have not otherwise had? That even this game could have implications for who gets into the tournament, much less if this was a tournament game and we couldn't look at it. So I think we have some of the technology. I think we can make simple solutions to make something like this work. I think it would be a positive for the game if we could get a call like this correct when we have the technology available to do so.
Right, and you mentioned how simple it could be. I don't think that there's a technological barrier here that's somehow making a requirement to have replay capabilities. Like this doesn't require a big thing. Like you said, it could be as simple as just, hey, there's the live stream of the game. Have a device there that you just rewind it to the play in question and watch it. Now, listen, just something as silly as some of the YouTube shorts I've made for our channel here with D3 dunks. Like this is something I do. Sometimes I'm watching a game and there's like a highlight dunk and I'm like, "Oh, okay, let me just, pull up what I need to make this clip." And as the live stream's going, I'm backing up and rewatching a play just to get that clip to post on our YouTube shorts. Like it's really technologically no different than having that kind of capability. Just like you said, an iPad, a laptop, whatever it is, just pull up the live stream, run it back to the play in question, and a lot of times you can even do it in slow mo or watch it a couple times, and at least you have that to give you an extra level of protection on a big call like that maybe got missed on the court. I don't think that that's a big ask considering how many games are already live streamed. This
Yeah.
isn't like we're encumbering, uh, a cash-strapped athletic department. Like this is just having certain things that are already taking place, like a live stream, having a device there where an official can pull it up. I don't think that's the barrier. I don't know exactly where the barrier stands to make replay available in a first, second, Sweet 16, Elite Eight type round happen. I would think that the very easy solution is just to say, yes, this is something we want, because let's be honest, this is something we need. This Morrisville SUNY Poly case just shows what the huge implications can be if we saw this type of situation play out in an NCAA tournament game. So wherever that breakdown is that's keeping this from happening needs to get broken down. And so I think it's incumbent on us as fans. I know there's a lot of players that we're connected with, coaches. Like this is something everyone should want to see get right, because should something like this happen in the future, 50-50 chance you're on the side that benefits, 50-50 chance you're on the side that is going home because of it.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a big ask. I don't know exactly where what needs to change, what level that needs to happen, but I think this is a big thing that people need to be talking about, and see where that change needs to occur, and be asking for it, because it would be a real shame. As great of a season as this has been, that means we're expecting a great tournament. There's going to be some high level opening round games, and to have something like this happen would just be a real shame.
And I think that's something I wasn't fully aware of, is that it's not allowed at tournament sites until the Final Four. In tournament sites, this, to be clear, we're talking about mandating it in the NCAA tournament, not regular season games. We understand for athletic departments around the country, getting game day crews maybe can be a challenge. But for an NCAA tournament, you shouldn't be running that on a skeleton crew. You have to submit a bid of what you can do for your site for making it a great weekend for the student athletes. I think replay can be part of that. If it's a simple process of, we have a laptop or we have a tablet available courtside, plugged in, streaming, that's available and has the ability to rewind like 5 or 10 seconds at a time. That's all you really need to get some of these big calls right. Again, one camera, you're only going to get the obvious ones correct, but I think that's what we need for the NCAA tournament to be part of the bid package, that yes, we can do check, check, check. I think live streaming is already part of the bid package. So just making them that have the replay capability courtside with a connected device, whatever needs to happen, like administratively through the NCAA to make that happen, I think needs to happen, because this could be a big deal.
You're right. I think that it makes a ton of sense to make this part of the standard by which a host would be able to be selected. But again, it even goes a step further, whether it's the championships committee or a commissioners council, wherever it is that needs to okay for this to happen. That's the first step, right? Because right now it's an all or nothing. It doesn't matter the capabilities or lack of capabilities of a host. It's just they say, we don't allow this, we don't use this. That's what needs to change. You talk about student experience. Right now, what they're saying is we're okay with this type of situation, like we saw with Morrisville and SUNY Poly playing out in the first 2 weekends of the tournament, just by not having replay available, saying we're not using it. What they're saying is we're okay with that situation playing out. And if you want to talk about student experience, how could you tell those kids that are on the SUNY Poly side that have their tournament game end, sorry, we're okay with what happened, right? That's issue number one with me. You're talking about student athlete experience. Let's make sure we have, in the year 2024, some basic capabilities to make sure we're not missing something like got missed at the end of that Morrisville SUNY Poly game.
Yep. I agree.
Where's the Tylenol? All right. Anything else we should talk about this week, Matt?
That's the show. That's the show. All right. Whew.
All right. Well, we're starting to get a little bit more tournament mindset here, Matt. Of course, that's kind of where we went with the huge implications of what we saw for that game. Obviously it's devastating in its own right to SUNY Poly to not have that opportunity that should have been available to them to go keep competing in that game in overtime. But just to think about the potential for disaster to have that happen in an even bigger game is just mind-blowing. But anyway, we're not quite to tournament time yet. But Matt, there is a bubble picture starting to take shape. We've, you know, dipped our toe into the regional ranking tournament picture a few different ways. And so we want to do that again here, just kind of talking in terms of bubble and should teams need a Pool C selection, kind of how teams are stacking up and how they're looking. So, Matt, we've talked about this, taking a look at current season to date resumes, projected resumes, and then we've kind of grouped teams into basically like, four or
Four or
five,
five
I think
buckets.
five
Five
different
buckets.
buckets here. Starting out with teams, we're not going to say locks, Matt, although there probably are a few teams who could just about lose out and still get in. But we'll call them nearly locks.
Nearly locks, yes. I think what we're calling nearly locks. I think Drew Pasteur on his site at D3 Bubble, he has a category for locks and near locks. This is the type of teams we're talking about. In Division Three, not until we get to the very end of the season are we talking about a team, losing out and being safe. But we're talking about teams with lots of margin for error. Their resumes kind of tick all the boxes here. We're kind of like a week ahead of regional rankings here. So we're going to start getting regionally ranked teams. We're going to start seeing the committees put teams in order. These are the teams that have those resumes to be toward the top of their regions, like we've talked about in past weeks. And just across the board of kind of the three main data criterias: winning percentage, strength of schedule, and results versus regionally ranked opponents. These teams have, for the most part, strong results in all three of those boxes. We're not going to talk much in this episode about common opponents and head-to-head yet. We still have a lot of season to play out, and those are going to, I always think of them as kind of maybe tweaking the rankings along the margins. And when we're taking a national picture like this, we don't have as many of those common opponent and head-to-head results to talk about. So the three kind of main boxes that I'll call them, these teams are all very well set. So teams like Hampton, Sydney, Randolph-Macon, John Carroll, Trine, NYU, Widener, Trinity, Texas, Trinity, Connecticut, Case Western Reserve, Guilford, Catholic, Keene State, Oswego State, UW Platteville, and Cal Lutheran. I think these teams have all put together a resume where they don't even really need to perform the rest of the season how they performed to date. They have a few more games for margin in there. They take a few losses, a small handful of losses, 2 to 4 usually, probably, and that's losses above kind of what's expected. Then they're probably still fine. A game like Hampton City and Randolph-Macon are still yet to play. It doesn't really matter who wins that game from the Pool C picture. It's not really going to affect their resumes that much. They're both going to be set. It's kind of expected that one team's going to lose those games. They might rematch in the conference tournament. It's kind of expected maybe another team's going to lose that game. So really, these teams don't have much to worry about. As long as they don't have a complete collapse, the wheels don't completely fall off. These teams are all going to be in the tournament. A bunch of them are going to win their Pool A's, and then the other ones are going to be really quick selections right after that.
You mentioned a bunch are going to be their Pool A's. So really, as we're going through this, and if you're keeping in mind that we have 22 Pool C bids for this season in the men's basketball tournament, a lot of these teams won't even come into play because, as you can see, the conference affiliations, there's a lot of conference diversity here. We've got 3 ODACs, a couple of UAAs, but for the most part, these teams are all going to be, they're the favorite to win their conference tournaments.
Yeah.
And, there's always upsets, but a lot of these will go on then to be their automatic qualifiers. And so really not even enter the Pool C picture. But should any of these teams listed here get upset in their conference tournament, their tournament future is really not in doubt.
Yeah. They're all going to be sitting pretty. We're talking, like we said, a bunch of Pool A's and maybe like 4 to 6 Pool C's out of this whole group. And usually your first, at least 6, if not maybe 10 Pool C's are pretty easy just to get in if you're doing like a mock selection. So this is that entire group. And you can see like a bunch of what I call key wins. These are wins we expect to be regionally ranked wins once we have regionally ranked opponents. The only team in this list that doesn't really have kind of a bunch of those right now is maybe Catholic. But then you look at their other resume, they have basically a 900 winning percentage and a strength of schedule that's currently in the upper 500s, and we project to be at least mid 500s. So that type of a resume, even for Catholic, even without a bunch of regionally ranked wins, they probably still have a good enough margin, a good enough padding in their winning percentage and strength of schedule that they're going to be a selection.
A year ago, we were talking about Catholic having that super high winning percentage, but the strength of schedule number was not very solid. Here, it looks like that won't be the problem for them. So should they enter the Pool C mix, they're looking good. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that one, Matt.
And we're bucketing these, which means we're drawing a line, but this is all like a spectrum, right? So Cal Lutheran, and they're kind of loosely in order. Don't take it as exact order, but they're loosely in order. Cal Lutheran was the last team I had here. And you can see their winning percentage is not quite as high as some of the others. Their strength of schedule is maybe not quite as high as some of the others, but they also do have a bunch of regionally ranked wins that'll be in their favor. So again, if they don't have the best winning percentage of strength of schedule, still very, very good, still solid. They're in the nearly locks category, but a win over a team like Tufts or a team like Illinois Wesleyan or a team like Pomona Pitzer could weigh in their favor come Selection Monday and still get them in kind of rather easily.
Yeah, and you mentioned the process. As we get to the Pool C table, the top team from each region is up for consideration at any given time. And should any of these teams be in
Yeah.
that situation where they don't aren't are already accounted for in the automatic qualifiers, these are the kind of resumes that when you're looking at who's being considered, just jump off the page if
Yeah.
you're lining them up and doing a mock selection.
Yeah.
So everyone looking good here.
You mentioned the process. I probably should have led off with that. The correct way to do this is to gather all the data, then take each region individually and number them 1 through 7, and then put everyone on the board and consider the top team available from each region, and then like seed and select teams that way. To be clear, we are not doing that right here. We're just kind of putting all of the teams into this data spreadsheet blender and kind of using a fake made up formula to try to get the teams in pretty much the right order and bucket them this way. So when you really do the process correctly, you need to start with the regional rankings and then get to this. We're way too early for that in our opinion, so we're not doing that. So just to be clear, we are taking lots of shortcuts here, but to get an early picture at the bubble, I think it works for now.
All right, so the next bucket we have, Matt, teams that are not nearly locks, but teams that are looking good.
Yeah, these teams are still probably fairly safe, I would say. They're not really expected to be on that bubble at all, as long as they kind of take care of business. These teams probably still have some margin for error, but not maybe more like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 games. Whereas the slide before, we're talking about like maybe 3 to 5 games of margin, which for some teams is getting right toward their end of their season. These teams right here still need to keep on winning, but if they win as expected, which is kind of winning most of their games and dropping 1 or 2 probably, then they will be, at the end of the day, probably fairly easy Pool C selections without too much trouble. You can see most of them still have like 2-ish, 2 to 3 regionally ranked wins. We're still talking about winning percentages that are for the most part up and around 800, at least high 700s, and or strength of schedules that are in like the mid 500s up to the upper 500s. So still very strong national resumes. We'll probably get some of these teams maybe still even in the hosting mix. Like I could see a Co or a Calvin or a Tufts or a Hood or a Rowan, maybe hosting a pod as kind of like a national number 3 or a number 4 type of a seed. So these still teams are very strong. I think these teams are closer to the lock group than like bubble out. So still fairly safe here from these teams.
You mentioned with the previous group of teams, the near locks, that basically everything looks solid across the board. Here you can see a few more cracks in the resume. The list of key wins is not as robust as what we saw in the slide before. A few of those teams, like Hood, ends up looking really good.
Yeah.
They have some great wins that are going to be great on the resume. But you see, like with Hood, even like the winning percentage is a little bit lower. But again, and I think this is the group of teams that the perspective I've been trying to gain is that they're looking good, but that means but they're not nearly locked. So sometimes a loss can feel like a really big deal. But the perspective I would try to keep with teams like this is even with like an 800 winning percentage, which is going to be very good competitive. It's like, if you're going to be in the Pool C mix with an 800 winning percentage, like that's pretty good. But that still means like you're losing 1 out of every 5 games you play. So losing a game, here between here and the end of the season is really not the end of the world, maybe even two. Where it gets problematic is if that, losing 1 in 5 becomes
Hmm.
3 in 5. Well, then that's a different scenario. But if you're talking about an 800 winning percentage and you're only dropping 1 in 5, you're not hurting your winning percentage any. That's just maintaining it. So this time of year where certain losses can feel devastating, or it's like, oh, we dropped this game, how's that gonna hurt us in the picture? As long as they don't turn into like prolonged losing streaks,
Yeah.
or suddenly you're going 500 over a longer streak, a lot of the, as you're 20 plus games into a season, even things like winning percentage can really start to stabilize. Where as long as you're not
Yeah.
going on prolonged streaks one way or the other, you're probably not going to be seeing huge changes to some of these metrics.
Yeah, and if you're taking some losses, are they kind of expected losses? Are you losing to someone in the bottom half of your conference, or was it in another competitive team in your league that's pretty even with you? We saw Calvin take 2 losses this week, one to Trine and one to Hope. Um, that moved them down the list definitely, but it didn't torpedo their season at all. Two seasons still, or 2 losses still gets them on this list here, still feeling pretty good. They're not going to want to go and lose to an Alma or a Kalamazoo or an Adrian down the stretch. But if they lose a game to Hope or a game to Trine or whatever, and win a couple of those games, that just kind of ends up kind of as expected. That's kind of what the projected data has said all along, all season long. So these teams definitely going to want to keep on trucking. At the end of the year, maybe one does fall out, but probably not all of them. And if the one that does is probably because they ended up taking too many of those losses. A team like Wash U looks really strong right now, 778 winning percentage, 583 strength of schedule. But that's such a tough league, the UAA. So like nothing against Wash U, who had a great win on Sunday against Case Western Reserve, but it's just a challenge every time out. So there are worlds in which they just, only go 2-6 or whatever it is down the stretch, just because every game is so tough and you just happen to lose a close game. They're all so close. They're only 1 or 2 possessions. And just kind of by the probabilistic nature of the universe, they end up losing too many of those games and maybe they fall out of contention and yeah, shucks. But we expect Wash U to take a handful of more losses. We expect them to get a handful of more good wins, and they probably stay in this mix and they probably get in quite easily. I didn't read out this list. For our audio-only listeners, this looking good group is Hood, it's Rowan, it's Tufts, it's Washington U, it's Co, it's Calvin, it's DeSales, it's Mount Union, and it's Christopher Newport. Those are all teams looking good.
The discussion you gave about the Wash U situation is interesting, Matt, because as I mentioned to you preparing for this episode, looking back last year when we did the same kind of episode, the last team we had listed in the nearly locks category was Rochester, which of course became a really interesting discussion because Rochester didn't perform to the projected winning percentage mark that we had as we were labeling them a near lock. But because of the strength of schedule, because of the results versus regionally ranked, in which they were like 10-6, I think, against regionally ranked opponents, there was still enough margin in there where, of course, they did make the tournament. So just kind of interesting. Wash U could be maybe a similar case. I don't think the projected strength of schedule is not to the level where Rochester was a year ago. I don't think the results versus regionally ranked would be to that level, but just goes to show that there's no one's locked into any tier or anything like that, but certain teams are looking good.
Yeah. And that Rochester team did take a lot of losses down the stretch, and they got themselves into a Saturday at the end of the season where they had to basically win that game to get in, and they did. So they were nearly a lock, and they got in the tournament. So we were just fine last year, Zach.
All right, the next bucket, Matt. Here, teams that probably are not feeling as good about where they currently stand, but they're bubble in.
Bubble
right?
in.
There's no guarantees, but they're on maybe the safer side of the picture getting a little dicier.
Yeah, and I feel like I was trying to be a little bit conservative where I was drawing the line here. So bubble in, I'm still thinking is above our line for kind of bid thieves. So these teams, if the tournament was today, or if we started conference tournaments today and we knew there were going to be some upsets that would happen, these teams would be the last few discussion points, but I think a bunch of them would get in, right? We maybe still have some Pool A's in here, like Johns Hopkins could win their Pool A, Nichols could win their Pool A. One of these American Rivers teams, I guess we saw Co on the previous slide, but one of these American Rivers teams could win the Pool A, WPI, St. Joseph. Um, so we're still probably talking a handful of pool C's, and I think these are all teams that are still on the plus side. But now we're all of a sudden our margin for error is getting very, very small. It's not zero. These teams can still lose some, but we don't really want to take too many unexpected losses here. We want to keep winning, and we definitely still have our eye on winning the Pool A. We don't want to take very much for granted once we get to this point where we're talking bubble in. Pool A would still be very nice to have going into Selection Monday, knowing that your name will be called and you don't have to sit on that bubble. So, depending on how many upsets nationally we get, these teams might start to feel more uncomfortable and get closer to that bubble. Depending on what their results are, they take maybe an extra loss or two, then they're starting to feel worse. And it also depends on what teams are doing around the country. So a team on the slide that we're going to come after, if they start going on an absolute tear, maybe they start taking some of these spots away. So these teams are still feeling okay. They're feeling pretty good, but I think we still want them to do some work before they're feeling good about the tournament. I'm just going to read off the list again for our audio-only listeners on Spotify or Apple Podcast. But we're talking about Johns Hopkins here, Nebraska Wesleyan, Loras, Emory, Nichols, Dubuque, WPI, St. Joseph, Connecticut, Albertus Magnus, and Connecticut College. These are all teams I would project into the tournament right now, but we're getting a little bit close to that bubble line. They're on the good side of it, but we're getting a little scary here.
Yeah, so these are teams that really can't afford to not perform at a similar clip to what they've performed so far, Matt. What's jumping out to me, you see like an Emory already a sub 700 winning percentage.
Yep.
Granted, a great strength of schedule. Um, a couple wins that are likely to be regionally ranked wins, and then just of course in the UAA, it feels like anytime you win
Yeah.
any game, it's a good chance that that's going to be a win against a regionally ranked opponent. Um, but again, it's not quite the Rochester
Nope.
situation where you have a plus 600 SOS. So if Emory can't go down the stretch here matching, a 667 clip at least, or try to get at or above 700 around there, they can't feel super confident. And looking at some of these strength of schedule numbers, especially as we get to like what that projected number is expected to be at the end of the regular season, you're seeing a lot more, 525 and below here. Um, and and when you can't pair a really good winning percentage number with a really good strength of schedule number, that's going to be problematic. So for these teams that have a lower strength of schedule or lower projected strength of schedule, they need that winning percentage to look as pristine
Right.
as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed out Emory. Right now, I have them down as those two key wins. They're going to get a lot of opportunities in UAA play to get some really big wins, but they're going to have to convert on those. Right now, I think I'm just showing Christopher Newport and Brandeis as probably being ranked in their region. Um, again, through UAA play, some of those other teams will turn into regionally ranked teams and regionally ranked wins. But we were talking with Rochester about 10 regionally ranked wins, and probably some of those were highly ranked. They don't have a region number one victory right now. That I don't think so. Emory's not going to want to really get below that 667 mark. You can really, you can see it going either way in UAA play just because it's so tough. But their margin for error is thin. A team like WPI with that 525 strength of schedule, that's definitely playable, but you're getting toward the edge if you don't have other things. If they just have a one win against like a number 7 type team Williams, which is kind of what the computer's throwing out there right now. Again, that's a resume that if the bubble tightens up, if we have a lot of upsets, maybe that resume gets left off just because there's not a whole lot to differentiate it from a lot of other resumes out there.
And this is the first time we've seen a NUMAC team on any of our lists, but that's going to be a really competitive
Yeah.
conference tournament, right?
Right.
There's WPI is the first team to show up here, but if you're talking WPI or the field in the NUMAC, I'm probably taking the
Yeah.
field. So that could be a problem for WPI. Matt, just one more thing on Emory. The good news for them is they've gotten to this point playing a really road heavy
Yeah, they have.
schedule in the UAA. The first turn through UAA play has been very road heavy for them. The good news is they will play 5 of the last 7 UAA games at home. So, that's the glass half full perspective is, if you're looking for them to at least match or exceed what they've done so far, the good news is
Yeah.
a lot of those road games going 5 of 7 on the road in the first turn. They'll get 5 of 7 at home on the return trips.
Yeah, going to want to get a lot of wins there for them for sure. And then just another team I'm going to call out, Loris. Their projected strength of schedule, which is through the end of the regular season before the conference tournament, for them is only 500 for me, which is pretty low. They're going to want to get deep into that American Rivers Conference tournament to get as many additional games against other quality opponents to bring that strength of schedule up, because you
Yeah.
don't want to be on the table with a 500 strength of schedule. They do have maybe some good wins within their region already and an opportunity to get more, so that will help them. But we've seen SOSs in that range get left off if there's other reasonable options on the table. So that could be tenuous as well for them.
So that's our bubble in group, which makes sense. Now, Matt, we'd move on to a bubble out group, a similar group of teams, but this is like if you bucketed them with the last group, like this would be the second half. And as we start to see some bid thieves, some upsets happen in conference tournament, maybe some teams that weren't expected to be in the Pool C mix, and there's some leagues that were expected to be single bid leagues. Should the favorite take care of business, suddenly become multi bid leagues because someone knocks someone into Pool C and takes the AQ. If we have another year play out with a bunch of upsets like we saw a year ago, these are the type of teams, at least in the
Yeah.
current picture, that figure to suffer.
Yeah, and as I mentioned on the previous slide, I feel like I was a little bit conservative here. So you could maybe make an argument that the actual bubble in versus bubble out line maybe closer to where hope is here, and that I have a few too many teams on bubble out. Um, I just didn't want anyone feeling good that wasn't really, really, really good. But here we start getting a little bit more issues on the resume, not being quite as strong across the board. Maybe the winning percentages aren't quite as solid, or we don't have as many regionally ranked wins, things like that. Again, this whole bubble in and out thing is accounting for, I don't know, something like 4 or 5, 6 bid thieves across the country. If we don't get that, then a bunch of these teams on this list get in and get in. Maybe all these teams could get in, right? If we don't have any upsets. I think, what was it, 2 years ago we had like 1 or 2 upsets around the whole country. Last year we had almost a dozen. It seemed like there was a whole bunch, and the bubble got really, really tight. So that makes a huge difference. Bunch of upsets means that this whole team is maybe feeling bad on selection. This whole list of teams is feeling bad on selection Monday. Not very many upsets, and maybe this whole list has ended up feeling good. But our bubble out list for now, I'm gonna read them again. St. Lawrence, Virginia Wesleyan, Stevens, Hope, St. Thomas, Texas, Morrisville State, St. John's, Williams, Clark, TCNJ, and Pomona Pitzer. And Pomona Pitzer there at the end, I do not have a key win down there for them yet. So they're going to have some work to do on that.
Matt, this is where we have to bring up our discussion at the top of the show, because here we see Morrisville State enter the picture. And what's the strength of their resume?
It's winning
Whether it's
percentage.
current
Yeah.
and whether it's current or projected, the strength of their resume is winning percentage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that missed call where video review was not available, ending that game in a win for them instead of having to play in overtime, is exactly what they needed. Well, the win is what they needed. How they got it certainly is not the way anyone wants to see it happen. But
Yeah.
this is why it's a big deal.
Right.
It matters.
For sure. And they're probably the NAC tournament favorite. But again, any tournament, there's a lot of randomness that can be involved there, and maybe they don't win it. If they don't win it, they're going to be at one of these bubble teams that we're talking about. And they're going to need that high upper 80s winning percentage to overcome their SOS, which isn't that great. And the regional ranked wins so far are kind of ho-hummy a little bit. There's not a signature one there. There's a couple of decent ones. If they were maybe a game lower, and maybe they would have won in overtime, who knows? But if they were a game lower there, then that could make a big difference.
And interesting too, Matt, to see a team like Virginia Wesleyan here, because I feel like they're a team who played their best ball or got their best results earlier in the season, and things have been turning in a negative direction for them. I'm sure part of that is just the strength of the ODAC. You're playing tough teams, but those wins, Randolph-Macon, Christopher Newport, those came earlier in the season. Virginia Wesleyan already played a second game against Randolph-Macon, dropped that. It looks like the strength of schedule is and will be very good, but they're losing games at a higher clip than they had earlier in the season. So that seems like a team that's trending down. Now, obviously, what they showed earlier in the season is that's a team that's very capable of getting some big wins. If they stabilize, it's a team that maybe suddenly moves up the list. But if things continue in the direction it seems like they've kind of been going, um, if that winning percentage drops further, you show that right there, the projection is down sub 700. That becomes problematic for them, especially as they're picking up more losses without picking up additional key wins in ODAC play.
Yeah, they're a team, if we did this list purely on just the season to date numbers. So for Virginia Wesleyan, 737 winning percentage, 573 strength of schedule, and a win over Christopher Newport and a win over Randolph Macon. That's a resume that gets in. The computer is a little bit nervous playing the rest of their ODAC schedule. That's a very tough league. They can take more losses. So if all of a sudden now their winning percentage is less than 700, let's say, in the upper 600s, we're always talking about those types of teams of should they be in, should they be out. Their strength of schedule is still going to be one of the higher ones in the country. A couple of really good wins in there already. They can maybe add to that. That would be great. Or do some work in the conference tournament. They're a team that's not going to want to lose any of those unexpected games. They've taken a couple, it's a tough league, so you don't want to say any league is unexpected or any loss is unexpected, but they've taken a couple losses that maybe could keep them out of the tournament if it comes to that.
Well, here's the problem. I just looked up their remaining schedule, Matt. 5 games left in regular season play in the ODAC. They've got Hampton-Sydney twice,
Okay,
Guilford, Ferrum, who's already
beating them.
shown they're capable of beating a top team in the league, even if their overall conference record isn't, what maybe some people thought it would be as we were getting into conference play. And then finally at Randolph.
Yeah,
So there's the possibility they lose 3 or 4 of those games.
yeah. So they're going to probably have to. I don't know about have to, but they're winning one of those games against a Hampton-Sydney or a Guilford type of a team would be huge for them in kind of solidifying that Pool C spot. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we talk about the problems of criteria double counting, but I don't even think it's necessarily problematic to say it would be double counting. It would just be a huge win for them because they need to keep that winning percentage up, but then they also add another regionally ranked
Yeah.
win to their resume, and so even winning one out of those 3, it does an awful lot for them. But
Yeah.
again, the way things have been trending, let's see if they can get it.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, another group of teams that we would say at this point, both this point and as we're looking ahead with some of the projected winning percentage and strength of schedule numbers, they're probably out, but they're a group of teams still worth keeping track of, still in the mix. Maybe it would be another way to say it, but maybe takes a little bit something more out of the ordinary, or one of these teams going on a bigger run to put themselves in stronger contention.
Yeah, you look at a team like Hardin-Simmons up here on this list. They have a 842 winning percentage right now, a 554 strength of schedule. The computer sees that SOS declining a little bit, and maybe that winning percentage declining a little bit. But if they keep winning the games, if they can keep that winning percentage above 800, then the 529 strength of schedule maybe still is playable, and then have some ASC tournament games on top of that to bring the SOS up a little bit. Their problem is not going to be a lot of regionally ranked games in the American Southwest Conference right now, but they still probably have some of their destiny in their own hands, right, of winning a whole bunch of games. We talked about margin for error on previous slides. The bubble out slide doesn't really have much margin for error. This probably out slide are teams that are really going to want to think about running the table, kind of. Can you get all the way basically to a tournament championship game without another additional loss? And then if you can't win that game, then maybe you're still in the Pool C mix. I think a team that fits that bill very well on this list is a team like Illinois Wesleyan. We saw them take a handful of losses kind of in December, like leading up to Christmas. And then in CCIW play, they seem to maybe have turned a corner here. They're a team, maybe the only kind of CCIW team that projects to have a really good strength of schedule by the end of the season. They already have a win against WashU, who's maybe probably a number 1 in that region. So if they can continue to leverage up their winning percentage, kind of beat that expectation, win an extra game or 2, and get like solidly into the 700s coming into the CCIW tournament with that kind of mid 500 strength of schedule, a couple of good regionally ranked wins. A team like Illinois Wesleyan can move themselves up into the bubble picture, whereas right now they're probably still below the bubble picture. Easy for them with a higher strength of schedule, where it's going to be more difficult. Like I have Farmingdale State on this list because of their really good winning percentage, but they're probably out just because their strength of schedule is going to be nowhere near what's going to be required to get them in the bubble picture. It's just not going to be playable at all. So a team like Farmingdale State really isn't going to have much opportunity from here on out to transform their resume like an Illinois Wesleyan might.
Yeah, Matt, there are a couple others that jump out to me. Central, I think, playing in the
Mm-hmm.
ARC. Look, they
Yep.
have a projected really strong strength of schedule, and they're going to be playing that whole top mix in the ARC. Like they're going to have an opportunity to add some really great wins to their resume. So I think there's a lot of upward potential with Central. You mentioned Illinois Wesleyan. I definitely agree with that. They haven't lost since the calendar turned to 2024. They've won, I believe it's 7 in a row in
Yeah.
CCIW. So, the blemish on their resume there is the winning percentage. But the way things have been trending over the last month is they've been on the march to improve that. And then just, as the regional ranking picture evolves, that could very well help Illinois Wesleyan because they have a win over Chicago. Chicago
Yeah.
has been one of the pleasant surprises in
Yeah.
UAA play. And I think, we're not taking a look quite yet at the regional ranking picture. We'll do that next week as we preview what we believe or what we expect to see in that first alphabetical list of regional rankings. But I think Chicago is very much in the mix,
Yeah.
not to work themselves their way in eventually, but probably right from the beginning, just the way that that whole region, as we've talked about in previous episodes, is shaping up. So I think that's another thing to look forward to with Illinois Wesleyan. Mary Washington is probably another more extreme example
Yeah.
of Illinois Wesleyan. They've got, just an insane SOS. A few good wins, but obviously that winning percentage is very problematic. If they can, I don't have their schedule in front of me, but if they can win out, I know things are a little bit goofy with the C2C scheduling there, so I don't know exactly even how many games they have left, but they're a team that like everything else is kind of in line if they can just win enough games. And then kind of the same deal for Marietta. Looking ahead, they've got a stretch where it looks like they can. They're probably aiming to increase that winning percentage, some winnable games, and then I know they still have Mount Union and John Carroll on the schedule, so some high profile games where if they can get those, suddenly you're adding some quality regionally ranked wins to your resume. So they're the other team on this list that I would pick out as maybe the three or four that have more upward mobility than maybe the rest of this list.
Yeah, I think you're right about Mary Washington being a very interesting case. I just pulled up their schedule here. They have 5 games remaining. They play Averett, Salisbury, Christopher Newport, Salisbury again, and Hampton Sydney. So that's 5 games, 4-1. They need 4-1 to get to 667. I think that's doable for them. I think that's difficult, but also 4-1 means they get a win over either Christopher Newport or Hampton
Or
Sydney,
Hampton Sydney.
which means another regionally ranked win. It would also be they lost that. Okay, there would be a split with Christopher Newport, so it wouldn't be a 2-0. So that wouldn't the head-to-head wouldn't maybe overwhelm the rest of the criteria there. So that would be maybe put them in the mix. They probably can't be worse than 4-1. To I think then your low winning percentage might kind of drag the rest down. So I think that's what they're aiming for, to really be in the Pool C mix. Then again, there's the Coast to Coast tournament, which will get them. That's a 4-team tournament, I think, or it could be the whole 6. So we'll have to see. Maybe they get another good game or two in there, but you really are running out of margin on your winning percentage side of things. So for them, I think 4-1 is the minimum, if not 5-0 to be in the mix. Any more losses than that, and they might just be kind of Pool A or bust.
And that really shows the difference at, going from the first slide to this slide. First talking about margin for error to going now to a situation like Mary Washington where you're talking about having to pull off upsets or to beat top
Yes,
teams.
right.
And that's really the difference this time of year.
Yeah, there's no margin, and in fact, these teams are wanting to pull off those upsets, win your 50-50 games, and maybe kind of win an unexpected game and climb the ladder a little bit, get yourself up to that bubble out list, pray for no upsets, win an additional unexpected game, and maybe you can get into that bubble in. So there's still nothing is set in stone. There's still time for teams to change their resumes. And for these teams, it's win. It's win a lot of games. It's win. I know Drew on his site, Drew Pasteur at D3 Bubble, he has a little tab called "Win Out Until Conference Tournament." So like if you win all of your games until your tournament final, what would be your percentage of Pool C? And these are the type of teams I think that need to kind of do that to be in the mix. So definitely keep winning. If you win, everything else will take care of itself.
Excellent. It's an exciting time of year. I'm looking forward to seeing this take shape even more. But hopefully, this gives some context as we're seeing the last month basically of games play out uh, for teams. When we lose, were they a team that had some margin for error, or are they a team that didn't maybe have some margin for error? It'll be interesting. It's always
Yeah.
fun. It's always fun this time of year to see, kind of what we expect or how things are shaping up, and then how that changes and evolves as we get even closer to selection time.
And other people do great work in this space as well. I've mentioned Drew
Absolutely.
Pasteur a few times. Check out his site. His computers give a little bit of different information than mine. Generally, teams are in generally the same order, but there are some differences. So check out mine and his and see what the differences are and what they might mean. Those are interesting. If you're interested in women's basketball, Scott Peterson does a lot of great work on similar type stuff, criteria, bubble picture, Pool C type things. He's a great resource. I know probably in the next week or two, Bob Quillman will be busting out his spreadsheets and his Quillman rankings. He's got a great insight as well. I think he tends to think about things a little bit less like a computer and a little bit more like the human committees might do it. So he's a tremendous resource. I think if you take our data, if you take Drew's data, and you take Bob's kind of Twitter rankings that he'll likely put out, I think you'll get a really good understanding of which teams are feeling really safe and where the bubble kind of is.
And Matt, I love that there's so many people doing things like this in different ways, and I don't feel like it's duplicating effort or competing effort. And I know those people you mentioned don't look at it that way either. And because the way I think about it is when, okay, if Drew's saying sees something some way, we see something some way, as Bob's doing his process, he sees something some way. If they all line up, that means something, right? That
Yeah.
should tell us something. And if there are differences, well, that also means something or
Yeah.
should tell us something. And so it's not even necessarily about who's right or who's wrong, but kind of looking from different angles, seeing how the pictures align or don't align, and thinking through like what the reasons might be for that.
Yeah.
Um, and again, here's the thing, none of us are going to be looking on, at the end of January here, looking at the picture and saying this is the way it's going to be,
Right.
and I'm right. Anyone who says otherwise is wrong. We don't know what the picture is. We can kind of see a picture developing and can evaluate how that picture looks at this stage. And then the fun is seeing it evolve and uh
And watching the
seeing how
games.
other seeing watching the games, see how other people take the results that we see, and how that changes the picture in their mind. And like, right, it goes back to, if I love seeing those times when yeah, I've seen tweets where someone will say, "Oh, predicted final score for this game is." D3 Datacast says this, Drew says this, Jacob Showers, says this,
Yeah.
and a lot of times there's some pretty close agreement, but there have been times, Matt, where, especially earlier in the season,
Yeah.
if we're looking at, oh, Massey says this team by this much, or, someone else says this, and there's big differences. And I think that's okay too,
Hmm.
right? No one can, ultimately, the game is played, and who knows exactly how a team is playing on that day. It might be a really great day, a really bad day. It's important to keep in mind that the games matter. But it's fun to see and to think about why or how some of these different opinions or metrics or analyses are consistent, or even it's even fun when they differ a little bit.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, Matt, speaking of differing a little bit, let's get into a review of last week's picks.
All right. Here we go.
All right. Matt, big one out in Southern California. Claremont Mudscripts was a 7.5 point underdog at Cal Lu. Cal Lu does get the outright win, but Claremont Mudscripts stayed within that 7.5 point margin. We both took the points and picked that one up. In the Centennial, it was Gettysburg getting half a point at Franklin and Marshall. We were both on Gettysburg, but Franklin and Marshall gets the 76, or excuse me, the 81-76 win. Congrats to F&M. That's a big one there in the Centennial. Williams was 8-point underdogs at Tufts. Tufts gets the 62-57 win, but does not cover, so we pick up that one. And Matt, the heartbreaker of the day, we differed. I was taking the points 4.5 with Wittenberg was getting 4.5 at Wabash. It was a 3-point game with 2.6 seconds left. Amani Jones broke the hearts of the Tigers, putting the game out of reach and covering for the Little Giants, taking that from a 3-point margin to a 5-point margin. And I'm sure he knew what he was doing in the process. Matt was swinging this game from a win from me for me to a win for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you correctly picked Wabash to cover the 4.5. And in the D3 Datacast game of the week, a huge one in the American Rivers
Yeah.
Conference, Matt. Co was getting 3.5 at Loris. Forget the points. They got the huge road win, 84-73.
Big win for Co.
So, yeah, so you couldn't quite match your 5-0 week, but it was a 4-1 week for you, Matt. You get to 35-24-1. It was just a 2-3 week for me, but I maintain a slight lead overall. I am 37-22-1 on the season.
Things are getting tight. I'm reeling you in. All right, well, here's the week 13 pick slate. I will go through them, and then we will pick one by one. The first game is Johns Hopkins, 2-point favorites at Gettysburg. Zach, we love picking Gettysburg on our slate, so 2 weeks in a row for Gettysburg.
Yeah.
The next game is St. Vincent. The computer says they are 7.5-point underdogs at Geneva. That's a big line there. Then we have a big heated rivalry game. Farmingdale State, the computer says, is 8-point favorites at Yeshiva. That's going to be a big one to watch. Out in the UAA, NYU is 3.5-point underdogs on the road at Emory. And then our D3 Datacast game of the week is a big one down in Virginia. Randolph-Macon, even. It's a pick'em at Hampton, Sydney. Let's go to the top. Zach, 2-point spread here. Johns Hopkins and Gettysburg. Who do you like?
I swear it's not, any salty tears over Gettysburg not getting us the win in last week's pick. But I'm going to go with Johns Hopkins. I feel like they're a team that really has started to put it together after a slow start. Give me Johns Hopkins 2 points, favorites on the road.
All right, Zachary, I'm going to go the same direction as you. I'm a really big fan of the way Johns Hopkins has been playing the last month or so, and I think they're going to get the outright win. I think they can cover the 2 at Gettysburg. The next game, St. Vincent and Geneva. The computer said there was a 7.5-point spread here. Zachary, your call.
Yeah, I'm going to go with St. Vincent just because I feel like this is a big spread. Although I feel like even though St. Vincent took the undefeated record a ways into the season here, I feel like I've been aware that in terms of the efficiency ratings, Geneva has, rated better than St. Vincent. But still, for as many wins as St. Vincent has been able to pile up, I just think 7.5 is too big of a number.
Yeah, back when St. Vincent was undefeated, I was looking ahead of where could they lose a game, and this was the biggest one that I circled. I was expecting Geneva to win this game, but I think 7.5 is too much. I'm expecting this to be maybe 1 or 2 possessions, not stretching a little further than that. So I will take St. Vincent as well, in a closer loss than 7.5. And we've got a rivalry game out at Yeshiva, an 8-point computer spread with Farmingdale State and the Max. Zach, who you calling?
I'm going to go with the Max here, Matt. I think this is another one where the number is too big for me, especially being to lay that number on a road team. We know there's been a little history between these two teams, so I'm sure Yeshiva is looking forward to the opportunity to have the Rams on their home court. I think we've seen Yeshiva play tough in games against Hope. This is a skyline rivalry game here, so 8 points is too big for me. Give me the Max.
Yeah, I'm sure this is going to be a great atmosphere and a great crowd. I don't think these two teams, they've been kind of rivals at the top of the skyline for a few years now. I think there's maybe some bad blood at the way things ended last year a little bit. I am going to go with Farmingdale State, though. I know that's a big number and a big line. We saw if I have my facts correct, I think Farmingdale has beaten Wesleyan this year, and then we just saw Wesleyan go to Yeshiva and win pretty big there. So I think that gives me evidence that maybe Farmingdale can handle Yeshiva pretty good. I think Farmingdale's been legit good this year. Yeshiva has been good at times, but I think Farmingdale's been a little bit more consistent. So I'm gonna say that on the road they cover the 8 points.
Go get him, Max Nation. He's picking against you. This guy right here
They're gonna
has you.
they're gonna hit my mentions pretty hard.
Hey,
Yeah, I'm
well,
ready for that.
let me just say that this is a big. You mentioned just kind of the bad blood, the history, the rivalry here in the skyline between these two teams. This is their only regular season meeting.
Yeah.
Yeshiva gets it at home. I think this is like the type of game they would have circled on the calendar.
Okay. Okay. We'll see. It'll be a good one to watch for sure. NYU computer is giving 3.5 points at Emory.
Man, I'm going to go with NYU, but this is like the ultimate trap game right here. We talked about Emory having to start off with the unbalanced schedule on the road. This is the Sunday game, so NYU will have to play the Friday game at Rochester and then make the travel down to Atlanta for the Sunday game. I feel like is probably you talk about the travel in the UAA. This is probably the toughest part of it, right? Because it's like you're making a second trip. So I feel like there's a lot of trap elements in here, but I like NYU's ability. You're giving me 3.5 here.
Yeah.
I like their ability to at least if they're going to lose, it's going to be a close one.
Yeah, I think NYU definitely has the ability to win this one. The game could go either way, but I'm only certain about one thing, and it's going to be that this game is within a possession either direction. And so for that reason, I'm going to go NYU because the 3.5 just is a little bit too big for me. Maybe Emory wins this game by a point, by 2 points. NYU could easily win this game, I think. I don't know who the winner is going to be, but 3.5 just felt big. So I will go with the Violets.
If I'm remembering from the picks last year, Emory was the team. They always did the opposite of whatever we expected, right? Whether it was good or bad, it was always the opposite.
Yeah.
So add that to the elements there, adding into this being a potential trap game.
ODAT game of the week. It's a biggie. Randolph-Macon, it's even at Hampton-Sydney. Even though Hampton-Sydney is getting more love in the poll, the computers say even on the road, it's an even spread, Zach. So where are you going?
Yeah, tough conference matchup here. Give me the road team, or excuse me, the home team. No,
Okay.
not the road team. The home team. Give me the home team. Even odds. You're just asking me to pick a straight up winner here. Give me the home team, especially one as strong and as balanced as Hampton-Sydney.
I'm voting both of these teams very high in my polls or my ballots. But I'm voting Hampton-Sydney number one. I think this is going to be a close game no matter where it is. But I think I agree with you. Give me the home team, even spread. Give me Hampton-Sydney's. I expect maybe a 1 or 2 possession game. But I think it's going to be the home Hampton-Sydney Tigers that come away with it this week. So that's our picks.
All right, on to the mailbag, Matt. We've got one entry into the mailbag here. Tyler asks, with Selection Monday roughly a month away, what do we think the field looks like as of now? Similar to a Lenardi bracketology, with top seed, first 4 out, last 4 in, etc.
Well, we did talk a lot about it through the episode of teams that are safe and where the bubble kind of is and what teams are looking like there. But to kind of all summarize a lot of what we talked about in one, if I go to a new picture here, this is sort of an up and down, side to side kind of S curve of where just my loose formula kind of lays teams right now. Again, we didn't go through the process right now and pick exactly which teams are in and out. But kind of the top seeds, the teams that you would expect to maybe host. Right now, I have Hampton-Sydney, Randolph-Macon, John Carroll, and Trine in a first group. NYU, Widener, and then Trinity, Texas, Trinity, Connecticut in a second group. Case Western Reserve, Guilford, Catholic, and Keene State. And then maybe rounding out the host-like resumes are Oswego State, UW Platteville, Cal Lutheran, and Hood. Now, obviously, when it comes to actual hosts, geography comes into play. So can you get 2 Region 10 hosts like Cal Lutheran and Trinity, Texas? Not going to be exactly sure for a while if that's going to happen. Do we need another host out in the Midwest, somewhere like Co or Wash U or even Calvin? Which of those teams can go on a run, maybe get in the mix, maybe one of those hosts as well. So it's things kind of moving around there, but those are kind of ish the teams that I expect to be in that position. The last 4 in that my kind of fake formula is giving right now is Williams, Clark, TCNJ, and Pomona Pitzer. First 4 out then are Central, Hobart, Franklin and Marshall, and Elmhurst. And then the next four teams right now: Western New England, Marietta, Gettysburg, and Stockton. So you can see, look over at the orange column, the third column over. I called the bubble line kind of around St. Lawrence, but really here, kind of if you think of the bubble as the last four in, that would be actually down at Williams. So there was maybe a grouping of teams kind of where I have as the number 10 seeds. Maybe those teams are maybe a little bit safer than I let on earlier in the episode. It's hard to say, and it's all fairly nebulous at this point in the season. But I was trying to be conservative and set that line a little higher than I thought it might be. So somewhere around where I have the number 10 seeds here is kind of where that bubble line would be. And again, this whole process I did is fake. So there will be a real process and a month more of games before we know for sure. So this is going to move a lot. If you want to yell at me, that's fine. I'm open to criticism there. But this is kind of ish where I see the picture.
Glad to know there's a real process and not just a fake
Yeah,
process.
it's not my
Thank you.
process. They do an actual good process to select the teams and do regional rankings. Yeah.
Awesome. As we mentioned earlier, yeah, next week's episode will be a regional ranking preview, so to speak, where we'll actually go and try to predict what we will see in that first set of regional rankings. So that should be fun. There'll be another in-depth look at kind of how that regional ranking picture at least will be shaping up. All right, Matt, that wraps up all the hashtag content for this episode. As always, we need to end with a great big thank you to all our supporters on Patreon, including a special shout out to Travis Ammo, who is our newest Great Job Team tier supporter. Great to have Travis on board, and continued thanks to everyone who's been with us along the way. We couldn't do what we do without their support. These are the people who, the way I think about it, Matt, is they've chosen a voluntary subscription to be able to make everything that's available on D3 Datacast, all the NCAA criteria, all the efficiency ratings, all those kinds of things, all that information on d3datacast.com available to everyone. And so thanks to these people who've taken on the voluntary subscription, so to speak, to help make it possible for everyone to access D3 Hoops community-wide.
Appreciate the support, everyone. Much love and thanks to you all out there. Everyone on this list who's been supporting us all year or who has just recently found us and started to support us. That's been great. We've been talking a lot about numbers, Pool C, at-large bids all season long in the abstract. I feel like now it's getting a little bit more concrete. Next week, we're going to talk about regional ranking previews. So we're about like a week out from real regional rankings. That's going to be awesome. NCAA tournament stuff kind of starting in February. Great time of year. Happy to be here. Happy to talk D3 on the D3 Datacast. Zach, thanks for the episode. Good job, team.
Good job, team.